Set in the 1990s, the movie begins with a hostage situation at a bank in South Dakota. The police quickly gather alongside the FBI. Why so many reinforcements? The leader of the robbers, Edgar Hallstrom, is a disgraced military man who has decided that robbing banks is his way of protesting against the government. The authorities cautiously negotiate with Hallstrom for the hostages' sake, but he refuses to cooperate. With no other options, the police begin moving in on the bank. One of Hallstrom's men reminds him that this wasn't part of their plan, warning that it will turn into a massacre if they don't surrender. Meanwhile, outside, the agents remind Supervisor Hartley that they have an undercover operative inside the bank. They have 3 minutes, that's the time the supervisor gives the infiltrator, who turns out to be Arch Jeffries, the very person who suggested Hallstrom's surrender in the face of the ex-military man's stubbornness. Jeffries asks for James's support. James is the youngest of the robbers and clearly wants out of the situation. But upon hearing James, Hallstrom silences him again with a slap. This sparks an argument among the thieves, and most of them label Jeffries a traitor. However, Hallstrom eventually lowers his weapon, giving the protagonist an opening to try negotiating by phone with the authorities. Unfortunately, the 3 minutes have run out. Amid gunfire, Jeffries implores the agents not to harm James, but sadly his plea goes unheard, and the young man meets the same fate as Hallstrom. Furious, Jeffries confronts Supervisor Hartley for giving the order and threatens him with his gun. Hartley defends himself by saying he's only following orders from Washington, like everyone else. Because of his outburst, the protagonist is demoted to monitoring phone calls and other signals that might contain suspicious information for the FBI, a desk job. Humiliating for a field agent with nearly 15 years of experience, but it was this or lose his job. We move on to a classroom in Chicago, where we find 9-year-old Simon Lynch, an autistic boy who barely interacts with his surroundings, preferring to immerse himself in puzzles and crosswords. It's the same at home. His mother Jenny reminds him that he needs to look her in the eye and supports him in his uniqueness. It's very touching, but you might be wondering how this child fits into the main plot. He's about to discover that himself. In his magazine that day, Simon finds a crossword puzzle that is unusually different. A regular person wouldn't notice the variation, but he has a gift that others lack. Quickly, the boy calls the hidden number in the puzzle to prove he has solved it. Though he hangs up after only a few seconds, the technicians at the so-called puzzle center are astonished because they don't really work for any puzzle center. They work for the National Security Agency, NSA. Their names are Dean Crandell and Leo Pedrak, and they have created Mercury, a cryptographic code meant to protect extremely high-level secrets. It's a code so complex that in theory, no one should be able to crack it. That's why they took the risk of publishing it in a magazine, thinking they'd get no response. They were wrong. They immediately informed Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Kudrow, the official in charge of the Mercury program. Far from appreciating Simon's brilliance, he only cares about the vulnerability of his code. That evening, after putting Simon to bed, Martin and Jenny receive an unexpected visit from a detective named Peter Burrell, who tells them about a possible harassment case against their son. Alarmed, the Lynches let the detective into their home, not realizing they're allowing the enemy inside. In a split second, Burrell kills them with his silenced pistol. As he heads to Simon's bedroom, he is forced to double back to hang up the phone because Martin managed to dial 911 right before he died. By the time the killer returns to search for Simon, the boy has already escaped. When the police arrive, Burrell slips away, making it look like Martin committed the crime. Meanwhile, aboard Jeffries is at his new job when he receives a special assignment to locate a missing child in Chicago. At the crime scene, Detective Jeffries suggests that Martin, overwhelmed by debt, decided to kill his family. Jeffries wonders why Martin would have a $1,500 gun if that were the case. While inspecting the child's room, the agent hears a strange sound he initially mistakes for static on his radio. He soon realizes it's whimpering. Simon never left the house. He was hiding in the closet. Despite the boy's resistance, the agent takes him to the hospital. There, he hears for the first time about autism. Because Simon is very sensitive, he can't answer Jeffries' questions without risking a meltdown unless Jeffries earns his trust. In the next scene, Crandell and Pedrak are called to a secret meeting by Kudrow, who informs them they have failed to silence Simon. Kudrow, however, has no intention of giving up. Not with a code as valuable as mercury on the Linian demands their absolute silence. Late at night, Jeffries can't sleep, tormented by memories of James. It was his responsibility to protect him. Interpreting this as a sign, Jeffries heads to the hospital, where he learns that Simon has been moved to another room at his parents' request, parents who, unfortunately, are no longer alive. While searching for the child, the agent is told by a doctor that Simon was taken to radiology because he hit his head. As Jeffries turns away, we see that the doctor is actually Burrell in disguise. Both men then race to find Simon, but fortunately, Jeffries finds the boy first. He does run into Burrell in the elevator, but Jeffries is now suspicious of him and keeps his gun hidden behind his back. When the doors open, the assassin starts shooting, but the agent escapes with the child in an ambulance. Just when Jeffries thinks the worst is over, with the ambulance out of commission, he has no choice but to continue on foot, carrying Simon in his arms. Despite the child's protests, at least this allows Jeffries to move on and take the subway, where he hopes to avoid more pursuit. But on the next train, another hitman boards. Fortunately, the protagonist spots him in his peripheral vision and uses the boy as bait to lure the killer to the space between the cars. There, he attacks, shoving him onto the tracks just as another train passes. With no answers from Simon, Jeffries decides to hide in the home of Tommy, a friend from the FBI and the only person he trusts for now. Learning about the killer on the train tracks, Tommy confirms that the authorities haven't found any body there. Someone removed it quickly. Someone who doesn't want the truth to come out. He advises Jeffries to turn the boy in, but Jeffries refuses to abandon him. With a borrowed car from his friend, Jeffries presses on, though with no clear destination. Simon makes things more difficult by repeatedly saying his father will come sing him a goodnight song. He doesn't realize his parents are gone. At dawn, Jeffries wakes up to find the passenger seat empty. He immediately goes into the nearby neighborhood looking for the boy and spots him walking purposefully toward a location. Jeffries catches up, and again they move on together. The child directs him until they reach his home. True to his routine, Simon goes in expecting his mother to welcome him. Jeffries tries to play along. After looking at the crossword puzzle, the boy dials the same number as before, alerting the NSA programmers. Although Pedrak wants to inform Kudrow immediately, Crandell tries to talk to Simon. However, Jeffries takes the phone, demanding an explanation. Before his partner hangs up, Crandell manages to tell him he will contact him by email. Right after this, Jeffries and Simon flee the house because a nosy neighbor has alerted the police. At the public library, the agent uses a computer to find Crandell's email, which turns out to be an encrypted puzzle. After seeing how skilled Simon is, Jeffries asks him to solve it, and the boy does so quickly. The message reads, "Today at 12, at the Ringle building." Before that time, Jeffries leaves Simon in the care of Stacy, a stranger who seems trustworthy. At the Ringle building, the agent meets with Crandell, who explains the origins of the Mercury Code and its espionage purpose. That's why they can't allow a 9-year-old to learn to decipher it if he can. He can reproduce it. Kudrow won't let Mercury fall into the wrong hands. He'll do whatever it takes. In the crowd, Jeffries spots Burrell and chases him, but the assassin uses the confusion to vanish. At least the agent manages to get the security footage that captured Crandell's murder. When Jeffries returns to Simon, Stacy asks if he robbed a bank or something, and Jeffries just thanks her for watching the child. He doesn't want her to be silenced as well. Meanwhile, a terrified Pedrak informs his girlfriend Emily about Crandell's death, though he can't bring himself to say who did it for fear they might be overheard. While in a street market, Emily points out, "A typewriter primitive technology never betrays you." Back at home, Pedrak writes out a statement detailing everything that has happened. Just then, he gets an unexpected visit from Burrell. Returning to Jeffries, he is forced to ask Stacy for permission to spend the night at her place. The following day, Emily visits her boyfriend and finds him dead on the floor. Through Tommy, she arranges a meeting with Jeffries and gives him Pedrak's written statement, which exposes Kudrow as the one responsible for the Lynch's deaths and the informatician's murders. That same night, the protagonist infiltrates a party hosted by Kudrow to negotiate. Either Kudrow lifts the kill order on Simon, or Jeffries will take Pedrak's statement to the United States Congress. Since it's carbon copy paper, it still bears its creator's prints. Angry, Kudrow replies that thanks to men like him, capable of making tough decisions, the nation is the most powerful in the world. So he doesn't care about killing a child. He considers a mistake of nature if it protects the Mercury Code's secrets. The agent leaves, giving Kudrow 36 hours to make the toughest decision of his life. Jeffries then arranges with Tommy to extract Simon via helicopter into a witness protection program. What neither of them knows is that Burrell has intercepted their conversation. The next day, Tommy gets a nasty surprise at work. Kudrow appears, revealing Tommy's secret alliance with Jeffries. Since Jeffries is considered a lunatic who kidnapped a child, Tommy's boss, Lomax, decides to let the NSA handle the situation. After Kudrow leaves, Tommy gives Lomax a copy of Pedrak's statement to back up his story. Meanwhile, Stacy takes Simon to the building's rooftop, where he's supposed to be extracted. Instead of Jeffries, they encounter Kudrow, who introduces himself as a witness protection agent. As the helicopter approaches, an assault squad sent by Lomax bursts in. Kudrow uses the chaos to board the helicopter with the boy, but someone is waiting inside. Jeffries. Both men fall back onto the rooftop and struggle over a pistol which goes flying away. At the same time, Simon walks along the edge of the building, almost looking like he might jump. Suddenly, in an unexpected move, he picks up the gun and hands it to Jeffries. After gunning down Burrell, the assault squad proceeds to arrest Kudrow, who in a fit of rage grabs Simon as a human shield. Fortunately, our protagonist doesn't miss. Kudrow ultimately falls to his death, and Jeffries breathes a sigh of relief. Sometime later, now with Stacy as his partner, Jeffries visits the special school where Simon studies. The boy has been adopted by a caring couple. Handing him a puzzle, the agent receives for the first time eye contact from Simon, who gives him a hugitz, his way of saying thank you.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.